Guys, welcome back to the channel. RacerX here, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about the properties of E85. Many of you guys have asked me, listen, RacerX, is E85 good for somebody that wants to use it like on their daily driver? Well, as you know, this is my 1,000+ horsepower Mustang. Of course, this is on E85, dedicated E85, and of course my Hellcat also a dedicated E85 car. So I want to talk to you really about the pros and cons of E85, especially for those of you that are looking for something for your daily driving car. Definitely some things to point out. So if you guys are new to my channel, please do me a big, gigantic favor. Only 22% of you guys are subscribed to the channel. Please hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up, and here we go.
T-minus 15 seconds.
So the first thing I want to talk to you about is why people go to E85 in the first place. It's like, you know, RacerX, what's the point? Well, several reasons people go to E85. One of which is it allows your tuner to run more timing on your car. It's almost like buying race gas from the pump. It is pretty darn cool. And ever since I switched to E85, like for example on my Hellcat, the car ran more consistently. And E85 also tends to burn a little bit more cleaner. It burns colder. There are lots of great properties to E85. It's actually a fantastic way to go for guys that want to make big power in their cars without having to go through all the hassle of ordering race gas and keeping drums of it in their garage. There's a bunch of crap that comes with race fuel. And with E85, like I said, you just pull up to one of your E85 stations and you just fill it right up, and then off you go. And like I said, we run basically ethanol based fuel, and at a much lower cost. Typically E85 is a cheaper fuel to burn as well, which is really nice. Right now our gas prices are kind of out of whack, so E85 is actually really expensive all across the country, but typically E85 is a much cheaper fuel as well. So next I want to talk to you a little bit about maybe some of the drawbacks of E85, and there are a few to talk about. And first and foremost is just the cost of conversion. And obviously that's something you have to think about up front. There are lots of different ways to do it, really depending on your power goals. Like on this particular car, I wanted to make some pretty big power. So I went with a full 4 innovation system, which is the full triple hat, different lines, also, you know, twin regulators, all sorts of stuff on this thing, because later I want to turn up the wick on this car probably and, you know, maybe make 1,300 horsepower or some ridiculous number, at least be able to do it. I've got more than enough fuel pump in this to do that. But E85, I mean, one of the things about it is it takes about 35% more fuel. You have to flow that much more fuel to just make it work, which typically means if you want to go to E85, you've got to upgrade your fuel system to some degree. Like on my Hellcat, I just did a double pump system and I kept the stock lines because I knew I didn't want to turn it up much past, say, you know, 1,000 horsepower or maybe 900 wheel, which is right about where that car sat, maybe just above that. But any more than that, I would have had to make several other upgrades. But there are some costs that come to E85. Obviously, you have to tune the car. For E85, typically, you have to go with bigger injectors. Obviously, you got to flow that much more fuel in. So the injector cost, depending upon how much power you want to make, is how big your injectors go, and your cost kind of goes up from there. But you can figure maybe on average, you know, $1,500 to even $2,000 for injectors. And then if you want to do like a full 4 innovations fuel system, you're looking at, you're looking at maybe like $3,000 or something like that. So, I mean, you could be upwards of like $5,000 just for doing the conversion and the tune on E85. Or you could go a little bit less invasive like I did on my Hellcat. But just keep in mind there are some upfront costs to E85 and the tune to even start, you know, worrying about all that. So keep that in mind. Now, this kind of bleeds into my next point, is simply you have to fill up more often. I mean, because you're burning through 35 to 40% more fuel, when you switch over to E85, it's amazing just how fast your fuel gauge goes down. So if you're looking for something for a daily driver and you drive your car a lot, just be mindful of the fact that, yes, sometimes E85 is less expensive, but you will always be at the gas pump because, man, the thing really burns through a lot of fuel. That's the first thing everybody says when they jump over to E85 is, man, I cannot believe how much fuel I go through in this thing. So definitely something, if you do a lot of driving, you better be prepared for it. So next, a really big thing is availability. So a lot of you guys watching at home simply don't have E85 readily available, or if it is, who knows, maybe it's at some station that's 30 miles away, and it's really not feasible to think about only being able to fill up at one station that's maybe 30 or 40 miles away from where you live. It's just not really a great option. So now they are getting better and better with flex fuel tuning, meaning that you could put either say 93 in it or put E85 in it, and that is very, very cool. But when I tried that on some of my other platforms, the car was pretty darn inconsistent, and that can be a little bit of a struggle sometimes. Some people swear by flex fuel. I've just never been a big fan of going like the flex fuel route. I just had a lot of inconsistencies with the car doing that. But at the end of the day, if you don't have E85 readily available, it may not be a good option for you, because if you do have E85 stations out there, you got to know where they are. It's very, very important. They have little apps out there. I use an E85 app. They're just free a lot of times to just download, but you got to know where your E85 stations are. And furthermore, you got to know when they close. I can't tell you how many times I've been out cruising around, and then sometimes these stations will close extra early, and then there you are with your car basically on E, and you can't get any fuel, and that can be a big problem. So you have to almost like plan ahead, or anytime you get below a half tank, which is what I do, I just go ahead when I'm going by one of my stations and I just fill the thing up. It's probably the best practice when you're on E85. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is very important. It's actually fuel quality. So we already discussed, hey, look, you got to find out where the fuel is, but also you got to find out what kind of quality that fuel is. And when your tuner tunes your car, you typically want them to tune it more for like E70. And believe it or not, when they do that, they can still add a lot of power and a lot of timing and make that work and still keep the tune somewhat safe, because the fuel quality really does vary depending, on what station it is. Also, depending upon what time of year it is. There are lots of different variables in there. And they make little cheap E85 testers. They make little sensors that you can actually put in your fuel tank that show your E85 quality. And those are all really good ideas, because the last thing you want to do is put a bad tank of E85 in your car, have it not run right, or even worse, go extremely lean. And we know what happens when your car goes lean. Your engine tends to go boom. So you always have to be mindful of fuel quality. And some stations, I have noticed, tend to get a little bit better fuel than others. But you don't really know that until you kind of get the word of mouth from other people, or you test it yourself. Like I said, there are lots of different ways to kind of do that. But just be mindful that there's always that possibility of getting bad fuel somewhere, like when you're traveling or whatever else. And that can lead to a few problems. So something to be cognizant of. Now, one other little side note about E85, and I've seen a lot of people like in my comment section on this, and they're always wondering, well, will E85 even help my car? On some platforms, E85 really doesn't make a big difference. My good buddy Rob, with his 392 Charger, beautiful car, cammed, ran fantastic, and it ran very consistent on E85, but he didn't pick up a lot of horsepower. As we know, the 392 cars, they're pretty optimized from the factory, so you don't see big gains on E85. And other cars like this Mustang GT, you'll see bigger gains, with even on naturally aspirated, cars. But really where you see the biggest gains is when you talk about boosted cars, whether it's a twin turbo like this one, a supercharged car like my Hellcat. That's where really E85 comes into its own. So the guys out there that are saying, oh, look, I've got a 392 or a 5.7 Hemi, and I'm going to go put E85 and I'm going to gain 50 horse. Don't expect that, guys. It is not feasible to expect those kinds of gains going to E85 on naturally aspirated cars. Like I said, there are a few platforms where it really does make a big difference, naturally aspirated, but you're not going to see these gigantic power jumps like a lot of people think. So something to be mindful of. One other little note here, and maybe this is something that a lot of people won't talk about, but for me, being a gearhead, it's something that I did notice right away in both the Hellcat and the Mustang, is the thing just doesn't really bust off the same way in terms of the cold start that it would like on regular 93 octane. At 93 octane, both these two cars just ripped. When you started them, they were loud and just that nice, thorough, like just crunch when you start the thing. On E85, it's just not like that. They almost like cough and sputter a little bit. And when it's cold outside like it is today, oftentimes you even have to start the car twice before the car will actually fire up. And when it fires up, it's just kind of more of a it's more subdued. I don't know what else to say about it. You're not going to get that hard, crisp, clean, cold start like you would with 93. It's just a difference in fuel. And even the 93, it smells different than E85 does. I mean, when you're behind a car on E85, you can smell the difference, and corn really doesn't smell particularly great like race fuel does. So I don't know, it's something else to consider. Well, guys, that is about it. That's kind of my little summary on whether or not E85 is great for those of you that want it for daily driving. So, I mean, if you've got E85 readily available, you're okay with the cost to go ahead and move to E85, and you do your homework on where your stations are and all that kind of stuff, E85 can be absolutely great. But just keep in mind, you're going to burn through a lot more fuel. You're going to be at the fuel pump quite a bit. Your car will be more consistent. It burns nice and cold. A lot of great things about E85, but just know what you're getting into when you move over to the corn gas. That's really the extent of it. So anyway, guys, let me know what you think about it in the comments down below, and I will catch you on the next one. So until then, RacerX.